Hey there, welcome everyone to another installment of Talking Marijuana. We are happy to talk for the next hour about all things marijuana. We're your hosts. I'm Barry Kramer. I am the patient operator of California Patients Alliance. We're a fully accredited dispensary, Galacca Dispensary, here in Los Angeles on Melrose. Come and visit us if you're in town and you're a patient.
And I'm Yami Bolaños, and I'm the patient operator at Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center that is in Hollywood, California today. And I'm the founder and president of the Greater Los Angeles Collectives Alliance.
That's the biggie one right there.
And bringing class and safe access to the citizens of the city of Los Angeles since 2006.
Yeah. And with us in Sacramento is Don Duncan. He's coming via Skype.
Hello, everybody. I'm Don Duncan, the California Director of Americans for Safe Access.
Doing great work there in Sacramento. Thank you. And in studio today, we have our guest, Cynthia Johnston. She is with the Normal Women's Alliance. She's also with the Brownie Mary Democratic Club here in Los Angeles. And she's a blogger with... what is that? United States versus Marijuana.com. We're going to find out a little bit about that because I'm intrigued what that might be about. Cynthia, welcome to the show today. It's nice to have you. Let's jump right in. We've had a lot of activity in the state legislature here in California. We've I think, tried to do a pretty good job of covering things all around the country, but we're definitely a little biased for things here in California. And it has been a busy week, and Yami, you and Don were down in Sacramento last week. So let's catch up on what's going on in California. And Don, why don't you take us away on that?
Well, you know, it's the special time of year in Sacramento. This past Friday, was the deadline for bills to be introduced for the new session. And so everybody had to get their bill in by Friday. So Yami and I were working the halls in Sacramento trying to introduce a bill, the Medical Marijuana Organ Transplant Act, that would protect the medical marijuana patients in California from being denied an organ transplant based only on the fact that they use medical cannabis. And as Yami was saying last week, she's a transplant patient. She's probably going to need another transplant at some point in the future, and her medical marijuana use could be a problem. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they've already told her she's not eligible for a new organ transplant if she uses medical cannabis. And Yami's not the only person in California facing that struggle. One of our members at Americans for Safe Access in Los Angeles, Norman Smith, died after he was removed from the organ transplant list. He actually passed away because he was denied an organ transplant based on his medical cannabis use. And so we tried very hard this year to get that done. And, you know, Sacramento's, just like Washington, D.C., is a strange beast in politics, and it takes a long time to get wheels turning. And we didn't get an author this year. I was really sad to find that we couldn't get any of the Democrats, or frankly Republicans for that matter, to step up and author this bill. But we did make some really good connections. We made some progress, and we're going to be back next year with an even better campaign.
Now, why would you think, Don, that something where people are not only, I mean, they're literally dying because of this flaw in our law, why would lawmakers not want to get on the right side of that? What keeps them back?
You know what I kept hearing from folks all over the Capitol is, oh, you're so right, we should fix this, we should really do it.
It's a no-brainer.
And then they would sort of whisper, but it's an election year. And you know what happens is that these the politicians are really terrified of having to vote on anything controversial in an election year because they know their opponents are going to use it against them, and they do. Anytime in California, it's we're a supermajority Democratic state, but even amongst the Democratic Party, opponents within the party will attack one another if they give them any leeway a vote on medical marijuana, for instance. And so it's really unfortunate that in this election year, politicians don't yet find that safe space to stand, and that's why it's so important that we all talk to our elected officials and let them know that people in their districts, voters in their districts, support medical cannabis and would not hold it against an elected official who voted yes on organ transplants.
Really?
I think it's so ridiculous.
They're afraid of that.
How
they're
could
really
you,
afraid that they're going to get pilloried for standing up for medical cannabis.
And I think that's so sad that someone can consider that because they were compassionate enough to vote for something that was going to save somebody's life, that someone could use that against them. You know, what a sad state of affairs in the state of California.
That is the state of affairs of politics. That's what that is.
It is.
And,
I mean, it's not only a marijuana, obviously, this year. I mean, we're already hearing that basically, we don't have a government. I mean, it's an election year, so everybody's out to lunch. They will only do what's safe. They won't govern. They won't do their jobs, and we're stuck in this. It's a very hopeless, sort of crappy situation, I have to say.
This is in every state legislature.
Correct.
In Washington, D.C.,
It's
lawmakers are paralyzed by fear of losing a vote for standing up for a controversial issue. So last year in California, we had numerous proposals that would have implemented our state law. Unlike the other 20 states where medical cannabis is legal, we have no state regulations for medical cannabis. It falls to the cities and counties. And
which leaves us very vulnerable to federal intervention.
Get over the hump and be adopted in a non-election year, and they all failed. And the price of losing in politics is that it emboldens your opponents, and that's what we're dealing with this year in Sacramento. Is that our opponents, the people who are ambivalent about medical cannabis, which is outright opposed, now feel very bold. They feel like we couldn't get it done last year, so now they're going to step up to the plate. And there are 4 bills vying for approval this year in California. 2 we oppose outright, 1 we support, and 1 we're still trying to make up our mind on. And I'll talk about that one last. But let me tell you the 2 we oppose right up
break
front.
these down for us.
There are 2 things that are just non-starters as far as we're concerned. One is a bill called AB 2500, Assembly Bill 2500. It's by Assemblymember Frazier, a Democrat, co-sponsored, by the way, by Senator Correa. We'll talk about him a bit later. This bill will make it a crime to drive with any detectable amount of cannabis in your bloodstream. It's what they call a drug driving. This is a big thing.
We can't drive anymore.
Right now, drug driving. And of course, we know that patients who regularly use medical cannabis will test positive because the cannabinoids are fat soluble. They will test positive for days and even weeks after the impairment of cannabis is over. So just because there's THC in your blood or in your urine, when you're in a traffic stop does not mean you're impaired by cannabis.
Of course.
Senator Correa, the co-author of this bill, actually brought this bill last year. We managed to defeat it with little more than just grassroots elbow grease. Just pushing back on this and saying, no, you cannot make us all criminals if we're not impaired. And the bill was withdrawn last year. It's
and
back
also,
this year,
there's no...
we oppose this bill. We oppose AB 2500.
And also, from what my understanding, because there's lots of stories in the news about drunk driving, and that seems to be a new issue that people are focusing on all across the country, in all the states, Colorado, Washington, and Michigan, everywhere. But what comes out in all of those articles is that there is no way to tell if you're impaired or not.
Exactly.
So they're making you a criminal without any proof, without any science, without anything. They're just saying, here's an arbitrary amount that we would, want in your system, and it doesn't relate to anything scientific. It just sounds good, and we also have no proof and no documentation that this will impair you. We just know it's in your system, and so we want you off the road.
It's a political move, right? It's not a safety move. It's a political move.
Absolutely.
Well, also coming down the pipeline, and by the way, on topic of drug driving, Forbes magazine just did a wonderful op-ed on drug driving, and we're basically asking the question: if there's this huge spike in stoned drivers because of medical marijuana, where's the body count?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just not there. The outcome is simply not there.
Right.
But moving on to collectives and cooperatives in California, everyone's most controversial topic. A few years ago, we adopted a bill in California that said in every city and county across the state, collectives and cooperatives have to be located 600 feet from a school. And so there's a new bill this year, that's AB 1588 by Assemblymember Conway. And Assemblymember Conway's bill would require that collectives and cooperatives be located 1,000 feet from schools. This would bring the state into compliance with federal sentencing guidelines, but does really nothing to help patients at all. It's sort of another arbitrary restriction to put on collectives and cooperatives. Where this one's going to be really interesting is in places like Oakland or San Francisco or other cities that already have rules on the books that have buffer zones smaller than 1,000 feet or no buffer zones. For instance, in San Francisco, so long as your property qualifies, there's no buffer zone between schools. So those cities should be coming out against this bill as well because it will preempt their local control. And ironically, while cities and counties have been just dogged in their demand for local control over medical cannabis, a bill like this is coming along to sort of take it away. And what I typically see with people who are pound the drum for local control is that they're all for local control, and it means restricting and hemming it in and making medical cannabis more difficult. But when a bill like this comes along that would do that anyway, they're like, oh yeah, the state should do that, and there's a little inconsistency there. So we are also opposing AB 1588, the 1,000-foot buffer zone bill.
And LA doesn't do anything for us because we're already at 1,000 feet, so from schools, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter for instance, in Los Angeles,
it
was already 1,000 feet, as it is in many cities and counties. But for the other places where there are no regulations or where there are lower regulations, for instance, the city of West Hollywood, which is right in the middle of Los Angeles, rules like this, would be problematic, frankly. So moving on, I don't want to take up too much time with bills because it's sort of wonky stuff.
No, we like it. This is interesting stuff.
That's still on the table from last year. AB 604 by medical cannabis champion Tom Amiano. He's a Democrat from the Bay Area. And AB 604 is a very long bill. I know visual aids hardly ever work on Skype, but here it is. This is AB 604. It is thick. It is many pages long. And it basically creates a regulatory structure through the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control to license commercial medical cannabis activity, cultivation and distribution. So AB 604 is a good bill. It definitely has some problems, and chief amongst its problems is the fact that it puts control of medical cannabis in ABC, where they're used to regulating vices and not regulating health care. And so while Americans for Safe Access supported AB 604 last year, and we'll probably do so again this year because it's we consider it better than nothing, we have some strong reservations about having the alcohol people controlling medical cannabis, especially in light of what we've seen in the state of Washington last year, where the alcohol board really, frankly, messed up medical marijuana in Washington and tried to co-opt it and take it over and make it all an adult use, vice-oriented access control model as opposed to a healthcare model.
And they're still doing that, yeah. I mean, that's happening in Washington.
That's what's happening, yeah.
Sure. Now, the bill that's really going to make waves in Sacramento this year is Senate Bill 1262. SB 1262 is by Senator Lou Correa. Lou Correa is a very moderate Democrat from Orange County. He serves as part of the state where actually every city in Orange County bans medical marijuana dispensaries. So this is a district that is not very sympathetic to medical cannabis or supportive of local access. Senator Correa's bill, we got wind of last year, and it's a bill that's sponsored by law enforcement and by the League of Cities, both of which have traditionally opposed medical cannabis bills because they don't want any bill on the books that gives legitimacy to medical cannabis. But we've been hammering away at them and at lawmakers, and they can see the writing on the wall, and so they've sort of come to the table this year for the first time. And so the good news about SB 1262 is that it actually reflects an evolving consciousness within law enforcement and within cities and counties of the need to regulate even if you don't like it. And so I'm happy about that. I was also pleasantly surprised when I saw this bill that it does two important things. One is that it puts control of medical cannabis in the Department of Health where it belongs. And that's the first time we've seen that proposal in state law. And the second thing is that it sets up some safety criteria for collectives and cooperatives, for dispensaries, that are really common sense things about security, about the behavior, about law enforcement reporting, things that make sense. And that was really good to see from a bill that, frankly, we were really afraid of.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, it's not all good news with AB 1262. And
it's got to have some poison in it.
Hard this bill.
Well,
because the
in
bill
a bill that's
also,
that big, it never is good big.
Reaffirms the rights of cities and counties to ban collectives and cooperatives, which is something we don't like in California. We don't like cities and counties to have the right to opt out of Proposition 215, as it were. And so the author is very set on that. The sponsors are very set on that. And if they prevail in that effort, it will maintain the current status quo where cities and counties in California can ban medical marijuana dispensaries. The other thing that's going to be very controversial on 1262 are restrictions this bill puts on doctors who make medical cannabis recommendations. Now, I think we can all acknowledge that there are a handful of doctors in the state of California who are really doing a bad job of representing the industry and the movement of medical cannabis by just passing out recommendations, say, to anybody who shows up at a certain rock concert. And if you buy a ticket to this rock concert, then you get a recommendation.
We were just talking off air about the High Times Festival.
Who are selling this inappropriately. So there does need to be regulation of doctors, and Americans for Safe Access would prefer that we empower the medical board to to do its existing job, and that is to regulate the practice of medicine.
Hey, Don.
The restrictions. Oh,
Don,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barry.
let's just let's take a little break here, and when we come back, let's talk about this how it affects the doctors, because I do think that is going to be the most crucial part of this legislation, and I don't want to give it short shrift before we go to break. So let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll finish up with the California legislation. We're going to talk a little bit about federal legislation that's going through this year, and then we're going to talk to our guest for a little bit. So we'll see you on the other side of this break.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick.
Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Podcast Network.
And welcome back. We're back. This is the magic of podcasting, Cynthia. We're back after a brief break. We were getting some info from you, Don, about the fourth legislative bill here in California, and it is from the League of Cities. And we were discussing a very controversial part of that, and that is the doctors and the regulations that will fall on doctors through this legislation. So go ahead and continue.
That's right. This bill is very, very tough on doctors. It's Senate Bill 1262 by Senator Lou Correa, and this bill sets up a lot of requirements for doctors that are going to be tough for them to meet, and would, if it's adopted in its current form, it almost certainly would serve to sort of choke off the number of legal patients in California. What they're focusing on is what they're trying to address are the people who are abusing the system most egregiously. Unfortunately, of course, these rules apply to everybody. And so they require things like a bona fide doctor-patient relationship, follow-up from the doctor.
Oh, your Skype cut out. Are you there?
Cannabis should be used in quantities. That, of course, there's nothing in medical that prepares you for that. They have a mandatory audit requirement, so that if a doctor writes more than 100 recommendations a year, he or she would automatically be audited by the health department to make sure that they're doing things properly.
Right.
Record-keeping requirements are enhanced. Children, minors who receive medical cannabis recommendations can only receive recommendations for high CBD, low THC medicine, which again will be an example of the state legislature sort of wading in to this debate about practicing medicine and how to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know
this
shit
isn't
about how to
the best way to
run
handle
that.
doctors. And I understand the senator and the sponsors' concern. It's a real concern, but we certainly don't want the state legislature chiming in and trying to regulate doctors that way and say you have to justify to the health department the recommendation you make to your patients.
Do you think the
There's also some
doctors?
question as to whether or not this bill would pass constitutional muster. In California, the state legislature can't amend a voter initiative. And so the bill, one of the provisions of the bill requires both a doctor and a surgeon to approve a medical cannabis recommendation.
Wow, surgeon.
And besides being completely unnecessary to have a surgeon involved in this process, it also, that seems to constitute an amendment to Proposition 215, which just says a doctor can write a recommendation. So raising the bar up like that is probably an unconstitutional legislative amendment of voter initiative.
Have you heard
Now,
any
we are
kind of
not yet
kickback
announcing
from?
opposition to the bill. And I'll tell you why, is because very often when this language spills out, it's like the first offer. And it's just like when you're selling a car. You usually put your price up too high at first, and then the person buying it will come back with a price that's too low, and you meet in the middle. And so this afternoon, I'm actually going to go meet with the author. I'm going to meet with Senator Lou Correa, and I'm just going to let him know where we stand on the bill, that we would like to get behind it if we could. We have some problems with it in its current form, and I hope we're going to be able to come to some common ground. We probably won't ever agree. You know, the senator is a very conservative Democrat from a conservative district, and so I don't think that we're ever going to see eye to eye on this issue, but I think we can find some common ground, and if we can move forward with a bill that's got common sense dispensary regulations in it, that puts regulation in the Department of Health where it belongs, and a bill that is supported by law enforcement and by cities, I think we're going to be in really good shape in California. So I'm cautiously optimistic of making progress on SB 1262 and getting some amendments.
There's been a lot of pushback already, though. I mean, the bill dropped on Friday, and I've already read in the last 4 days about 5 very strong oppositions to the bill, because they say that it will take away 90% of the medical marijuana patients in the state because of the way that it's going to limit the doctors to be able to write recommendations.
Well, I think if we're going to be adults and be honest about the discussion, you know, there is an excess of patients in California. It's not been an open door policy or a backroom legalization kind of policy, but it has allowed people to slip through, mostly because of the doctors that just sort of open door, revolving door, send people through their offices. So there is a problem that needs to be addressed with that, so that true medical patients get the attention that they deserve and have fought so hard for their rights for.
I think you're exactly right about that. And this is, you know, Americans for Safe Access agrees with the marijuana industry and the medical marijuana industry about 95% of the time, because typically speaking, what's good for industry is good for patients. This may be a situation where the interest of industry and the interest of patients depart. And it just has to be that way, because shoring up the credibility of the medical profession in the field of medical cannabis is good for patients, and it's good for getting good laws adopted. And if it means that some of the patients that are eligible to buy marijuana right now are no longer eligible, what I would encourage those people to do is to go out and either advocate for an amendment to the law or a change of law, or if you're part of that class of people, I don't think it's a huge class, but I think there's a significant number of people who see medical cannabis as a stepping stone to legalization. Maybe it's time to stop talking about medical and start talking about legalization. You know, we have a medical only focus, but if you're sort of pretending to be sick so that you can have access to dispensaries, the greater good for your cause will be to step up and say, no, I want legal.
And that's not out of reach now. I mean,
don't try to hold medical cannabis hostage to a broader agenda.
Absolutely. We've seen such a sea change in the American public's willingness to accept legal marijuana, that there is no reason to have a false argument of let's get medical and then we can get my legal.
Although here in California,
can definitely keep them separate.
Yeah, but here in California, I think it's important that we straighten out medical before we, bring on recreational. And I think that the fact that there's a bill, being looked at or that's been dropped by law enforcement in the League of Cities is the writing on the wall, like Don says. They know it's coming.
What's the pushback from medical profession on this bill? Have we heard any?
It would not be appropriate for me to speak for any other organization. I think we can all safely anticipate the medical profession and their lobbyists are not happy at all about this bill.
Yeah, I would think.
And I have met with lobbyists from the CMA and others, and
so this has
I'll let them, of course, say their own thing, but I think you know how they're feeling.
This has a bit of a fight to go to make it.
It's likely at the end of the day we'll oppose this bill, and along with everyone else. I think our community needs to be a little bit more strategic about when proposals, whether they be initiatives or bills, come up. There's a whole year left. We haven't. It's February now. It's the end of February. We have until the end of September to oppose bills. Right now is a great time to sit down with people and to talk and to build common ground.
Try and shape
we
them.
can always oppose later. We don't need to jump to a position. And I think too often people say, "Oh, it's a law enforcement bill by a conservative senator. We're opposed." Probably a better idea to talk a little while. Let it ride for a minute, and you can always put in a letter of opposition. It takes 5 minutes.
Compromise is the key in some of these things, though, and as long as you're at the table and talking, then there's still, a chance that it can fly or get a life.
In politics, it's all about compromise. If you're looking for something that's pure and 100% suiting to your values, politics is not where you want to go. It's not that.
It will make you sick to your stomach. So,
Crazy.
Tune in next week and you can hear what happened at my meeting this afternoon.
That sounds good. We'll definitely get an update on that. So
Next week, Robert Jacobs is going to be with us as well, so it's going to be a really good show.
That's
Robert
right,
Jacobs
yes.
is
Robert
the
Jacobs, I'll give him props. He's the mayor of Sebastopol and also the operator of 2 medical cannabis facilities in the state of California.
we're eager to talk to him.
A member of the Public Safety Committee at the League of Cities. And so he's been very helping us navigate those waters.
So moving from California to a broader legislative agenda, Cynthia, our guest today, Cynthia Johnston from the Normal Women's Alliance. We were talking before we went on air about a federal legislative bill that's coming up that you are eager to let people know about and get on board with and start to activate.
Well, 1523, House Resolution 1523, is the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act. It has
Sounds good.
About 23 co-sponsors now, 5 of whom are from California, 2 Republicans, 3 Democrats, I think. If you recall, I guess it was last week, maybe the week before, when President Obama, after saying he was going to do non-legislatively what he could, lobbed the ball into Congress's court on descheduling marijuana. I think we should all contact our representative in Congress, and ask them to co-sponsor this bill. It's one of many that's gotten stuck in committee with less than a 2 or 3% chance of even getting out of committee, much less getting passed.
So what's the main gist of the bill? What will it bring that we don't have now if we get this bill?
Well, it simply has asked the federal government to get in line behind the states that are legalizing for adult use and or medical and not interfere.
So leave us alone while what we're doing.
So it's really just Congress saying, do what you said you were going to do, which was not interfere.
So it's Congress sort of solidifying the memos that have come out of the Justice Department that have said that they won't interfere in these experiments?
I think it's codifying what they've all promised, and not all have delivered.
Well, because that's what we're hearing in other areas in our industry, is that we need... The memos are nice. It's nice to know the administration is behind us, but they don't carry the weight of law with them.
No.
And
Correct.
so in this case, where you need to respect what states are doing with their medical marijuana programs, and also recently with banks, the banks are being told, here's a memo. Go ahead and deal with these companies, and the banks are saying, we don't want to deal with these industries on the basis of a memo. We want legislation. Congress needs to enact laws, and we'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about it, but it does relate to
I think
this.
they're trying to hoping to prevent another several years of whack-a-mole, where we're all asked to stand up and declare ourselves as patients or legal or whatever have you, and then they come and smack us down and raid us and put us in jail. And now there's people rotting in jail for life without possibility of parole for complying with state law.
Right.
That just burns me.
Now we've discussed many of those stories here at the podcast. It's horrible, and I guess the only real solution we have, the viable solution that's there, is legislative. And as much as I am truly turned off by our process and our politicians and the duplicity that they have and the hypocrisy that they show, it is the only game in town, and there's no other way to change the law other than through our government. So we have to kind of stay in the battle and fight these things, and they do take a long, long, long time.
Well, we've been at this since 1970. The Controlled Substances Act was adopted, which is the current law that makes marijuana illegal under federal law. And we stand on the shoulders of the giants who came before us, who've been fighting and fighting and fighting, and here we are carrying on that fight.
Exactly.
Cynthia, you're with an organization that does a lot of fighting. Normal, they've been doing it since the 70s, and you're with their Women's Alliance. When did that come into being, and what's its focus, and what are you doing with them?
Well, I go back with Normal to 1980, so I'm actually a late comer. I was with, I worked on the California Marijuana Initiative in 1980, coordinating in Marin County. But the Women's Alliance was created because, around about 2010, 2011, the Gallup poll showed 50% of Americans were in favor of legalization.
Right.
But women were lagging behind at about 46%. So we wanted to close that gap, and we realized that those women are not in the cannabis community. So we couldn't just talk to ourselves and have fundraisers and parties and expect to move beyond that or move that needle up. So we reach out beyond the cannabis community to mothers and grandmothers and women who recognize that prohibition and the drug war are far more dangerous to their children's health and their community's health than consumption of cannabis. And we simply want to link up with those people so that the next time the polling happens, that it's there. We're at what, 54% now or something. But anyway, so that's Normal Women's Alliance.
So you have kind of an upward climb to convince mothers that prohibition and regulation is going to be worse than marijuana for their kids, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. Unless you start having a rational conversation and can get some facts on the table, because we are still combating the propaganda of William Randolph Hearst and reefer madness, and you can see it when people argue with you and they say the same things that have been said all along, and instead of getting mad, which is kind of the tendency when you hear this BS over and over again, is to reason and talk about what happens to a family when a kid gets busted.
Let's take a little break and let's answer that question when we come back. When we come back, we're going to talk about today's pretty much a legal day, so we'll get into some more legal questions on this, and we'll move on to some other interesting items in the news as well. So come on back with us, and we'll be back in a moment.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
We are back. Talking Marijuana with your hosts Barry, Yami, and Don. And our guest today is Cynthia Johnston, and she is from the Normal Women's Alliance and the Brownie Mary Democratic Club. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. But we were talking about this question of how families are affected by prohibition. What are the drawbacks? We know what they are. I'm asking this in a very broad terms, but what's happening to our families out there? Why do we need to change these laws?
Well, first of all, we do have to accept the fact that this tragedy happens in more African American families and Hispanic families than white families. But whoever's family gets affected by this, it's devastating. There's the money involved in just going to court and fighting and defending your case. If you go to jail, you're a convicted felon. You
lose your right to vote.
You lose your right to vote. You lose your ability to get a loan to go to college. You can't get a job.
Applicant. Yeah.
You can't get a house. You can't. So you're marginalized for life.
And we're not talking about criminal activity. We're talking about possession, drug arrests for possession. We're not talking about people that deserve to be in jail, that should be in jail for criminal activity. We're talking about the people that are caught up innocently and the effect on their lives.
And Barry, the small-time pot dealers too, the people who maybe sell a few sacks to their friends, but it's not a criminal enterprise.
Absolutely.
You know? They're just doing what a lot of us did in college, and those people are caught up in this dragnet too. And of course, the people who are accused of sales who never sold a bag. You know, maybe they had two varieties in two different bags, and that was considered sales.
Well, I'm suddenly speechless. It's just such a terrible thing to have happen to people who are doing the very same thing I do, and that many of us do, and that we do legally.
That our president did.
That our president did, exactly.
Many of our representatives have done this, and then have turned around and said, I did it, but
Put this
you
guy
can't.
in jail. Yeah.
And instead you go to jail and kiss your future goodbye.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. But you know what? Women ended prohibition, alcohol prohibition, back in the 30s. And so I'm very,
Women ended alcohol
yeah, women
prohibition?
was the ones that pushed the prohibition.
There wasn't a women's temperance
my,
order that
they,
said
the
you
women were the
couldn't
ones
have
that pushed.
alcohol.
No, they started it. Yeah, they started it. But at
started
the
it.
end, the women finished it too,
And
because they were the ones
Women
that
were so
pushed.
powerful that they both created
Now that
programs.
They
statement
created
I'll
a
agree
problem,
with.
and
Women
then they
started it and women finished
they
it
did.
as usual.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
agree.
So women didn't start this. Okay, this
you're outnumbered there.
cannabis prohibition, but they're going to
I
help
got Angelo in
end
the
it.
booth.
So anyway, women didn't start this prohibition, but they're helping to end it. And I think that they're doing, the Normal Women's Alliance is doing a lot of good work. You know, they united women from all walks of life, and they're coming up, and speaking out in defense
Yeah,
of,
I think there
what we're all
can't
doing.
be enough organizations that take whatever slant they're coming from to say that this is unjust, no matter what kind of life you lead. If you're a woman, if you're a man, if you're black, white, Chinese, Asian, there are certain human rights and certain moral things that are not being done right now. And again, it's because of our politicians. And, we welcome any group that wants to do that.
Thank you. And I think another important thing for women, and this may be something
More
women
the
are more
merrier.
inclined to do, is coalition build and work with each other, work with the different groups, and not worry so much about who gets the credit.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
You know,
I like
when
that
there's a
idea.
victory, and the victory is coming, we are going to win this. When there's a victory,
Everyone wins.
well,
And
in
wouldn't that be
Washington
nice?
they say when there's a victory, everybody shoots their gun in the air and claims what comes down. So there's going to be a fight over who gets to claim
What
What
comes
comes
the victory.
down?
But I don't care who gets the credit as
Yeah.
long as it happens, as long as everybody has equal protection under the law, and that, I can't go to. I was in Colorado on the day legalization happened. I was the sixth person to buy legal
Really?
weed
Yes.
at the 3D dispensary. And they have a tourist attraction, which is a long hall with glass windows, and you can look in on their massive grow, beautiful plants, just as far as the eye can see. Well, in that same state, Dustin Costa is sitting in federal prison for growing medical marijuana in California. How can you celebrate?
Right. And how do you
How do
square
you-
those
Yeah,
two
you
things
don't.
together?
It's
What
just
doesn't make
so
sense?
wrong.
Yeah. Well, it is a great experiment that's going on right now, and
That's true.
yes, this is part of the experimental time that we just have to move through.
The Brownie Mary Democratic Club. That's another organization that Cynthia's involved with. I am also involved with that. And the reason that there's 3 in the state of California, it's a brand new organization. It's a baby organization. Lanny Swardlow from Riverside was the first one to start a chapter. And there's going to be a Democratic convention on March 7th here in the city of Los Angeles. And we're going to have a table, and we're going to be able to talk to delegates about our situations. Mine particularly, I'm going to be talking about the transplant situation, and I'm going to be telling all those people how their elected officials wouldn't listen to me and didn't think that it was, important enough to, author it, So, that's going to be my line there. But this is another organization that also is helping and working very hard to try, to bring prohibition to an end.
Within the system. I mean,
Within
this
the
is a
system.
Democratic
Yes.
Party club.
Yes, it is.
So you are going to actively engage our Democratic Party here in California
delegates, yeah.
to change laws. That's a good way
That's
to
the
go.
kind of inside work that has to happen in the party because, just because you're a Democrat doesn't mean you've got your head screwed on right on this issue. That is
Right.
for sure.
And in California,
Lanny Swerdlow, who inaugurated this Brownie Mary Democratic Club movement out in Riverside County, of all places, which may be one of the least democratic places in the state of California. But Lanny, who's a nurse and a medical cannabis advocate, inaugurated this project, and he was telling me when he was pitching this idea, he said this is the same thing that the people advocating for gay rights and marriage equality were doing 20 years ago. They were forming Democratic clubs and Republican clubs and getting into the party and meeting people and becoming influential and raising money. And he says, all of the progress we've seen in the last 5 years on marriage equality and gay rights is not because all of a sudden Congress changed its mind or the state legislature changed its mind. It's because they did a step-by-step incremental process year by year of wedding themselves, pardon the pun, wedding themselves to the party until the party reached a tipping point and had to come along with this agenda. And so that's really what's happening with the LA Club and the Riverside Club, and there's one getting started in Sacramento. I'm really excited about Democratic clubs. I think they're awesome. I think it's a great plan.
So if people here in California would like to get involved in a Brownie Mary Democratic Club, how do they do that?
Well, they would contact Lanny Swerdlow to begin with, because he can give you all the instructions on how to put a chapter together.
I just happen to have an email address for Lanny Swerdlow if you guys would like it.
Yeah, let's put that out there.
If you're listening, click pause, grab a pen, and then click play. Here it is. It's Lanny Swerdlow, his first and last name, all one word, LANNYSWERDLOW. Lanny Swerdlow at earthlink.net. Lanny Swerdlow at earthlink.net.
He's still with Earthlink?
LANNYSWERDLOW. Lanny Swerdlow at earthlink.net.
Does Earthlink still exist?
I guess he's getting his email.
That is really old.
We need for people that are interested in this to get in contact with Lanny, because for every 20 people that sign up to the Brownie Mary Democratic Club, we get one delegate to go to the national convention.
No, to the next level up.
The next level up of the convention.
Which I think is going to be the county central committee meeting.
Okay, so if you're interested, please get in touch with Lanny. Please sign up. We need all the delegates possible. We're just starting this. This is a brand new thing. It's a baby.
So what does signing up entail? If we throw it out there to people, do they need to come to weekly meetings? Are there monthly gatherings? What does signing up for a Brownie Mary Club entail? And if it doesn't entail a lot, everybody that's watching this podcast, get it, that's in California, please call up and get signed up.
You don't have to go to the meetings because they send you updates about what happened to the meetings. You just have to sign up, and when there's meetings where you have to vote, then you have to attend to vote. But it's something that is just getting started. It's something that in the past with the gay community has worked very well, and that we're trying to, imitate now. So please help us if you're, interested in helping. Please, email Lanny.
If you're a registered Democrat, all you need to do is add your name to our list. If you want to change your registration and become a Democrat, join our list. You can go to the website of the California Democratic Party and find out where the meeting is going to be and show up at that March 7th meeting. You could sign up with us then, because as Yami said, every 20 members gives us one delegate to the next level up. And as we work our way up, that gives us a louder voice in terms of putting a plank on the national platform, which is one of our main goals. And do I have time for a little tiny personal story?
Do it. We got it. Let's
California Democrats have always been in the forefront of ending the war. From my position, my first job was in Washington, D.C., at the Watergate building, at the Democratic National Headquarters, answering letters to President Johnson about the war on Vietnam. And I had no idea how I got there or what I was doing at that point, but off in the distance, this rumble, hell no, we won't go, end the war. And that was the California Democrats who were going against the grain, and they started the end of the war in Vietnam. And that is what is happening with the drug war. The same people, bless their hearts, have gone against the party line. And I do have to say, Lanny Swerdlow gets credit for this, because there's a plank or a resolution right now at the Democratic Party has accepted that also ask President Obama to respect state laws. And it mentions the disparity in prison among African American
Right.
and Hispanic. I hate that word, minority. But the point is, they're doing it again. The California Democrats are again in the forefront of ending the war on drugs. Please join us. Please add your name to this. You don't have to pay dues, or you can. Our dues are something very restrictive, like 0 to whatever.
0 to whatever you can.
Exactly. So this is really part of a history, and we need you to be involved as a Democrat, as an independent.
This is what grassroots is all about. This is grassroots. This is getting together and trying to work within the system to change the system. And you can only do that if you get numbers. And so check out Brownie Mary. Get online. Check out how you can get involved. It sounds like there's not much of that you need to give of your time or your wallet. You just need to give your voice to the organization. So try to do that if you're watching us. One or two of you, or all two of you.
Both of you.
All two of you that are watching, please get on the internet.
Do I count as watching if I'm on Skype?
No, because we're watching you, actually.
We're watching
at the
you,
moment,
so
you're not
just-
watching.
Well, that's 4 viewers.
So, what an interesting reaction from the banking community to our government's our government saying, "Yeah, go ahead, deal with them."
Fool me once.
I have to say, to me, this week or the week of since the Obama administration has come out, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department. Great sort of PR week for Obama and the administration on how great they are with marijuana, at least to the marijuana advocates. Every patient that I've had comes into my dispensary this week and says, "Hey, here you're going to be taking my credit cards, or I can, you're going to get a bank now," and It literally was like a war of headlines, and no one read the content.
The details.
Because the banks have balked back at this, and most loudly the banks in Colorado and Washington, where they really need this to come online ASAP. They have lots of money that's just free-flowing around with no banking institution taking care of any of that.
Nobody getting interest on
Nobody
it.
getting interest. Well, the banks had a very interesting response why they don't want to get into this at this point. But let's talk about that when I get back from the break, because it's that time again, our final break of this hour. We're going to take a little break, come back, talk about banking and a couple of other interesting news stories. We had some great Girl Scout story this week that we should definitely pay some homage
Girl
to.
Scout story.
Okay, we'll see you on the other
prepared.
side of this break.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Let's introduce ourselves.
We're already on. Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Are you talking to me?
You.
Because I'm the only one here.
I'm trying to find my place in the article. Welcome back to Talking Marijuana. This is our last segment of the day, and we're in the middle. We're in the middle of talking about the banking situation.
Yes.
Last week, the Obama administration came out with the Treasury Department and the Justice Department saying that states can do banking business with the medical marijuana industry, given some restrictions that they laid out and some priorities that they laid out as well. So the banks have basically answered by saying, wait a minute.
So?
Here's Washington Bankers Association, which represents about 80 financial institutions in the state. Bankers are risk averse. They don't want to find themselves later subject to federal investigations. They're very concerned that the basic law making pot illegal is still there. It's still there. Congress needs to do something to change the law, not issue memos that have no bearing in a court of law whatsoever. So these banks are worried that they're going to, without banking, well, they're worried that
they could be prosecuted by the federal government if they, offer banking services to an illegal drug.
So far, only one banking institution, it's a credit union, I think, in Washington, that is saying, hell yeah, we'll take that business. Nobody else wants to do it. We'll get rich doing this.
I think that's exactly the case. There's going to be a niche market for cannabis banking because, you have to realize banks don't make money off checking accounts. They make money off investments and loans. So some bank is going to say, hey, we'll take this thing, but it's $300 a month for your checking account, and there's a $20 per transaction fee, and, you have an quarterly audit fee that you're going to pay, and they're going to just really pack on the fees.
So we got
screwed.
Sure,
you can have a bank account, but you're going to pay through the nose for it.
So we're getting screwed again. The providers are getting screwed again. All our bank accounts have been closed, and now if and when they do open again, well, not in California until we have state regs, but if and when they do open again, we're going to have to be paying sin taxes all over the place. So it's going to be worse than it was before.
Patients, those costs flow through to the patients. And so this isn't just an industry issue of like, oh no, the industry has to spend money. Every time they tack on a sin tax or a fee or a licensing expense to medical cannabis providers, that just flows straight through to the patient base that's served by those organizations.
Well, I'd even correct that and say we're really talking about legalization. Mostly Colorado and Washington are in the spotlight right here, and so we're not even talking about patients that it's being passed on to. This is just ordinary citizens that now can do illegal activity and have to pay a sin tax to do it because the place that they buy it from has to pay, $3,000 in bank fees every month in order to have a bank account or whatever.
But, a huge portion of the cost of a pack of cigarettes are taxes just like that. They just pack it onto tobacco because nobody's fighting back. And you may see a situation like that in legal states where they just really stack on fees because they know they can.
Thievery.
And alcohol. I mean, alcohol has a lot of fees and taxes that go along with it.
Wasn't there a court case where it was Timothy Leary versus the state of California, I think, when he proved that by paying taxes he was being forced to violate his own Fifth Amendment rights.
I am unfamiliar with that case.
I believe you're referring to Leary versus U.S. in 1969, was it? Which is that is actually the case that overturned the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. So Tim Leary, better known as the psychedelic guru, actually overturned the first national marijuana prohibition law because in order to comply with that law, you had to basically narc yourself out.
Speaking of taxes, there was another issue in the news this week, and another California dispensary in the news, CannaCare, in Sacramento, where you are, correct, Don?
That's right. Yeah, I'm very close to there right now.
So CannaCare has decided not to.
That's Lynette Davis, by the way.
Her name is Lynette Davis. We'll talk a little bit about their dispensary and stuff in a second, but the overall of the story is that. They were given a settlement offer from the IRS for about $873,000 worth of back taxes that they were not allowed to take off of their taxes, things like payroll, business expenses, supplies that they buy for their business. Any business expense is not allowed to be deducted.
The latest federal tactic is not to let medical cannabis and cannabis businesses deduct their ordinary operating expenses like every other business.
However, you can deduct all the marijuana that you want.
You buy. Right.
Totally. Yeah, you're allowed to deduct the marijuana. But you cannot deduct your payroll, your office.
And no business can operate that way. There's no business that can operate without deducting its ordinary operating expenses from
the difference in this story, because this story has been happening all over. We know the major story that it happened to was Harborside, and they're in a big fight with the IRS. And CannaCare, who was given a settlement, said, no, we don't want to take this settlement. We want to go to court and fight you on this because this is not legitimate.
Fair, and it's not legitimate,
doing. and we'll see what happens now.
Last
This is
week
going to be
when
very
I was in
interesting.
Sacramento, I had the pleasure and honor, distinct honor of having a conversation with Lynette Davis. You know, she was telling me all about her case and stuff. And she's really brave. I mean, I'm in the industry too, and to do what she's doing, and like she told me, she says the settlement was for $800,000. Well, their lawyers' bills have gone beyond that already.
Yeah.
But she says that she's willing to do that because it's on principle. She believes in what she's doing. She believes that she's being ripped off.
Well,
And
if
then
they
she's-
can make some claim to that and really show in court, where the federal government rarely likes to go because they can be embarrassed just as much in a federal court, although they tend to have the deck stacked in their favor, I guess. So this case is going to be very interesting to watch, I think, and a lot of people are weighing in on it. It's just going to be a real interesting next year or two that this will drag out for
And
sure.
these people, Lynette and her husband, they're just everyday people. They're not like, they're just homegrown people.
Well, that's an
And
interesting
it's very
aspect of this
interesting.
story as well, and that is that the dispensary is actually sort of a religious dispensary. They have a prayer there every day. Patients come and participate in their prayer groups, and they're a very religious organization. Now, usually that's on the opposition side, where the religious organizations say, family and religion, and you got to respect all this. Here you have, like Yami is saying, wonderful people.
Nice
people that give to their community, create a warm space for their community to come in. They're religious. It's not I'm not a very religious person, but, people should do what they can for their communities in the way they feel they can. And this is a perfect example of a dispensary that's done that. And they are going to have a lot of good press on their side for who they are, fighting this behemoth of the IRS that's coming after them for reasons that are absolutely off the charts, just wrong,
So, lots of luck to Lynette
Lots
and
of
her
luck to
crew.
Lynette
Yeah.
and her
Best of
crew
luck.
there
Thanks,
for
Steph,
sure.
David and Goliath.
Yeah, totally. David
One of the other
and
things
Goliath.
we were talking about, we didn't get a chance to talk last week. We had a lot to talk about last week. Was the huge rush of the southern states
Oh,
to kind of
Mr. Perry.
get on board. It's been time. They've been quiet for a long time, mostly adversarial for a long time, but.
They can count.
Yeah, revenue money is starting to come in Colorado.
Some of them
Washington's
can, some of
gearing
them
up
can't.
for it. Really, I think a lot of governors, there was a governor's meeting where the governor of Colorado basically talked to governors and said, hey, if you're interested in I'm not much for this. He's gone kicking and screaming the whole time, although I have to say he's gone along with the law, which is better than most politicians do.
Oh God, yes.
But he's not a full-throated supporter of marijuana, and has told in this last week at this governor's meeting, basically he said, if you're looking to legalize marijuana as a revenue source, that's a bad reason to legalize marijuana. And I couldn't agree with him more. I think that's a horrible reason, because all that does is start that tax train going, and
in
everybody
Washington.
wants their piece of pie. That's not the reason to legalize. The reason to legalize is because it should be legal
Legalize.
for adults to
Use.
consenting adults to take whatever they want to take in that matter, and that people are in jail for possession. It's just ridiculous. So.
For gardening.
So
gardening,
that's
yeah.
that's a really interesting thing. We got Tennessee, Georgia,
Texas.
Texas. Governor
Texas of all
Perry
places.
was interested in
Mr.
getting
Perry, I know. He just surprised the hell out of me.
And then there's hemp, too. That's a wedge.
And then there's
It's gonna
hemp.
Drive right through this thing.
Sure, the Department of Agriculture is going to make some leeway apparently for states that have legal hemp bills. So we're seeing the crumbling of this facade. It used to be a wall across for cannabis. No progress on the federal level, and banking such as it is, industrial hemp. Maybe some leeway on enforcement. It's progress, and I think if we take the big picture, if we step back and look at it, we can take some comfort and some encouragement from the fact that little by little we're chipping away at that federal
Some of the
facade.
walls are crumbling.
We
Some
love
of the
that.
walls are crumbling.
And the
Yeah.
walls tumbling down.
So one of my favorite stories this week, and we'll just wrap up with this, This is the cute little Girl Scout girl
Oh.
who up in
San Francisco.
Berkeley, right? Or
No,
I think
San Francisco.
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
She
Green Cross.
set up shop right outside the Green Cross dispensary. No participation with them, no nothing. Just smart businesswoman setting up shop outside the medical marijuana dispensary, and she cleaned up. I mean, literally, I think broke records as to
More
how
than
much
100 boxes of cookies sold.
how much she sold.
I think it was 117 in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And it was
Or
a
2
news
days.
story that caught fire. I mean, I had people
All over the
calling
place,
me at the
nationwide.
dispensary. They were calling me saying, hey, did you hear this girl selling cookies and blah, blah, blah. And within days, we had, I think, a Girl Scout in Arizona go outside one of her dispensaries in Arizona with her parents there and set up shop outside the dispensary. I thought it was great. And
Smart idea.
we had
I think the great news there is that these dispensaries are so safe that Girl Scouts can hang out front.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well,
They've got their own security guard.
I have to give a nod. One of our old hosts here on Talking Marijuana, Dan Gabriel, he's had a shift and hasn't been able to come in to record with us, but he's still my Facebook buddy. And on Facebook, I opened it up the other day, and he wrote this. Okay, so this is for Dan. He says, "Oh, sure. A Girl Scout can sell cookies outside a pot dispensary and everybody thinks it's adorable. But when I sell weed outside the Girl Scout meeting, I'm the asshole." I love that we can laugh at that and understand it all. But I do think that it's amazing progress that story came out, and it was a cute, adorable story. It wasn't about, oh my God, we have to save this child.
No, it was about good business sense.
Good business
that she
sense.
sold 117 boxes in 2 hours. That was a great idea. What a smart cookie. I mean, it was a positive thing, and thank God that
She
they made
did.
it.
She did great, and I'm sure they'll
Finally, a munchie joke that didn't insult us.
I'm sure they'll name a strain after her somewhere down the line, like Charlotte's Web. That's pretty good. I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. We've kind of hit most of the things that we were going to talk about today. We did have a cannabis cup here in Los Angeles last week, and that did get some press and a lot of attention, mainly because we are still in a state where medical marijuana is really the law. We don't have legal marijuana here. And you sure wouldn't have known that to go to the High Times Cannabis Cup in Santa Ana the other day. Santa Ana?
No, it's
San Bernardino.
San Bernardino at the NOS Center. Yeah, that's
at the NOS Center.
Last year, 2 years ago, High Times had a cup here. They forbid them from coming back to Los Angeles, and so they have to go to San Bernardino to rent the camp.
Right. I have to say, I was there, and it was, there was nothing out of hand. Nobody was out of hand, but there was an awful lot of just puffing and smoking and
There's
dabbing.
nothing medical
and
about
it really,
what was going
and it's, I can see where that would be a huge shock to anyone who's not really in the industry, how that can actually happen. They did have a doctor on site.
Oh, yeah, who paid exclusive rights to write the recommendations for everyone present.
So he was
made
the only
an
doctor.
ungodly amount of money that weekend, yeah.
He was the only doctor on site. He made an ungodly amount of money, but in his defense and the defense of the High Times Cannabis Cup, everything was done legally, letter of the law. There wasn't illegal smoking of marijuana recreationally. It was all patients. But that's part of the perception of what's really a patient, what's really going on. I just came, I spent
Go back to the legislation. Right?
I spent $40 to go in here, and now I can spend another $40 and get my my license and go in and smoke. So
there's a great article about the Cannabis Club, a Cannabis Cup, in Sunday's Washington Post by Mark Fisher. He goes into the movement, and, and it's a great
history.
article.
Oh, that was a great article on the
should read
history of the
that.
movement. We continually get recaps of our history periodically. Every 6 months, someone goes through the whole history of medical marijuana and how it's kind of come in legalization. And they're good to read, and they're good to remind us of the people that have fought for so long, like Cynthia, like Don, like Yami. They really have fought so long. I just sit at the table and hang out.
Me too.
We're done for the day. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.
Pura vida.
Bye, everybody. Pura vida.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FY. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.